सर्वमस्त्यक्त्वा रूपमाद्यं प्रभवति जगतः अनेकधा अनुग्रहाय प्रक्षीणक्लेशराशिः विषमविषधरः अनेकवक्त्रसुभोगी सर्वज्ञानप्रसूतिः भुजगपरिकरः प्रीतये यस्य नित्यं देवो हीशः स वो व्यात् सितविमलतनुः योगदो योगयुक्तः योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः। पातञ्जलमहाभाष्य चरकप्रतिसंस्कृतैः मनोवाक्कायदोषाणां हर्त्रे अहिपतये नमः।
So, greetings friends. Today we are going to deal with the sutra number 10. Abhor Pratyaya lambana tamo vrittir nidra. Nidra is defined now. Nidra is called sleep. In English, it's translated as sleep. And it is considered as one of the basically 5 mental activities, the chitta vrittis. And Patanjali is going to define what is nidra, what is defined as nidra. So he defines nidra as abhava pratyaya alambana tamo vrittir nidra. The first important thing to observe is what is called abhava pratyaya. Abhava pratyaya means there is absence of pratyaya. Now there are 2 ways to understand this. Pratyaya has 2 different meanings. One is that pratyaya represents a very subtle movements of the mind, very subtle vrittis of the mind. For example, in the dream state, the mind moves with in a very subtle way, in a very smooth way. That's why the mind that is in the dream state is pratyaya mind. Because the dream state is not bound very rigidly by structure, samskara and memory, like our conscious mind is. When we are in the conscious state, the mind is very much bound by structure and memory. It's very rigid. We are used to seeing things through a pattern of perception. When we look at people, we remember the people and there is a pattern of perceiving them. When we look at an object, we remember the object, there is a pattern of perceiving the object. Whereas in states like dream, etc., the mind is more fluid. The mind moves in a very fluid way. It's not really bound to a certain rigid structure of perceiving. So, Pratyaya mind is one of the most subtle minds that we can have, and it has very subtle, smooth movements. But Patanjali says Abhor Pratyaya. That means that Pratyaya movement or the movement of Pratyaya is also not there. That is the state of sleep. That means Patanjali's definition of sleep, Nidra, is a state of sleep that is devoid of dreams. It means even the most subtle chitta vrittis are not there. Even the most subtle movements of the mind is not there. The mind is very silent. The mind is completely stopping its movements. So this is one way of interpreting what is called Pratyaya. But there is another way of interpreting Pratyaya. Pratyaya also means Jnanam, knowledge, clarity. In certain contexts, the word Pratyaya is used to identify what is called as knowledge or clarity. So when we say that there is a Pratyaya about something, we mean that there is an understanding about something. We understand something in a very, very clear way, in a very crystal clear way, in a very good manner. There is knowledge. So, Abhor Pratyaya also means there is an absence of knowledge in the state of sleep. Now, this is more simple to understand when we understand this from our own practical experiences. When we are asleep, we have no knowledge of what is going on around. When we are totally sleeping, we don't know what is happening around us. Whether somebody is walking and going, we don't know. Whether a dog and cat is moving in the room and outside the room, we don't know. When we are absolutely in the state of sleep, the knowledge that we usually have, that disappears. So in some ways, it is a state where there is the absence of knowledge. Now this once again needs clarification, because later Patanjali himself says Swapna Nidra Jnana Alambanam Va. Now you must understand the knowledge of sleep and the knowledge of dreams, etc. And later he says this. So when we say that there is an absence of knowledge in this state, what does that mean? This means that, like I explained to you in the earlier sutras, this means that there is an absence of knowledge that comes from the chitta vrittis. See, we have knowledge that is established by the chitta vrittis. Samskaras and memories, they establish certain kinds of knowledge. I know that this is an apple, I know that this is a car, I know that this is a dog, I know that this is a cat, because the mind structure puts them in different compartments, and there is samskara about that, there is memory about that, etc. So there is a knowledge structure that we have that is defining things, that is defining our interaction with things. So when Patanjali says Abhor Pratyaya, when there is an absence of knowledge, this knowledge is not there. This knowledge that the mind is bringing, this knowledge that memory is bringing, this knowledge that samskaras are bringing, that is not there. Therefore, what is there? If this knowledge is not there, what is there? In the Sutra philosophies, we understand this as there is the knowledge that comes from Purusha, that is there, the spiritual knowledge. In the Vedic tradition, we say that sleep is that state when we are closest to the consciousness, when we are closest to the divine, because no other distractions are there. We go very, very close to the divine that is in our heart. That is why when we have a good sleep, we feel so rejuvenated, we feel so well, because we have visited the divine and then we have come. So we feel very well when we wake up from such a good sleep. In the Upanishads, they say that they are describing 4 states of consciousness. The first state is called Jagrat Avastha, where we are all now. We are in a state of Jagrat Avastha, which basically means we are awake. This is the awake state. We are awake, we are able to see each other, we are able to see the birds and the animals, we are able to see the traffic jam, we are able to see things that are occupying in our neighborhood. This is awake state. How is the awake state described in the Upanishad? Awake state is described in this following way. There are 3 layers. Let's say, for sake of simplicity, we are structuring our human system into 3 layers. There is the consciousness that is deep inside. Then there is one layer which is the mind and the mind structures. And then there is the external layer, which is the body and the senses. So in the awake state, the consciousness pervades. It pervades the mind and the body and the senses. That is why we are able to sense. Somebody touches us, we are able to know that somebody has touched us. If somebody speaks to us, we are able to hear that somebody is speaking to us. If something is cooked by our neighbors, we can smell it and we can smell that there is something. So the senses are active, body is active, mind is active. We are able to remember each other. We are able to remember the language that we have learned, and we are able to speak and communicate through that, etc. This is what is defined as the awake state, where the consciousness is pervading through all the structures of this system. Dream state is defined as that state where the consciousness is not pervading to all these structures, but it's only pervading till the mind, not the body and the senses. In the dream state, we are asleep. The consciousness has withdrawn itself from the body and the senses, but it has not withdrawn itself from the mind. So that's why the mind is seeing pictures. The mind sees movies. That is what is dream. The mind sees the movie, but we cannot really hear what is going on outside. Maybe some people are talking. We don't hear that because we are observing the movie that the mind is showing us in that state. So the senses are not working at that time. The body is not working. Working means in an awake state. It's not awake. But the mind is awake. This is dream state, swapna. It's an intermediate state. Nidra is the state where the consciousness is withdrawn even from the mind. So the consciousness is not pervading the mind also, it's withdrawn itself from the mind. And now tell me, when the consciousness is withdrawn from the mind, from the body and senses, where is it staying? Staying with itself. So sleep is that state where we are closest to ourself. This is how this Upanishad is defining. This is what is called as the Nidra Avastha. Sleep is that state where we are closest to ourself. And that is why they say that you are so disconnected from yourself when you lose your sleep. That's why Ayurveda says Anidra is one of the biggest problems, because Anidra means insomnia in English. In Ayurveda, Anidra is the disease where we lose sleep, we cannot sleep. They say that when you lose sleep, that means you are disconnected from yourself. When you are disconnected from yourself, you will have sleeplessness. So in some ways, they also diagnose the reverse. They say if you are suffering from insomnia, that you are not sleeping well, It means you have to reflect why you are not sleeping well. Maybe because you are disconnected from yourself. So the moment you start connecting to yourself, you will sleep well. This is how Ayurveda also talks about this concept of nidra and anidra. So sleep is that state where we are closest to ourself. But there is a fourth state that is called Turiya Avastha, the yoga state. Now yoga state is also defined as that state. When we talk about samadhi, etc., you will learn this more. Yoga state is also that state where the consciousness is withdrawn from the body and the senses, from the mind structure, and it is established in itself. That is what Patanjali says, tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. The consciousness is withdrawn and it is existing in its own space. So the question can be asked, so yoga and sleep state are the same. The state of sleep and the state of yoga is the same because we are with ourself. The consciousness has withdrawn into itself. Therefore, they must be the same. Now, the experience may appear similar, but there is a slight difference. The experience may appear similar, but there is a slight difference. It's like this. Let's say you that you are seated in a chair and you are so seated in the chair that you don't move. Now you cannot move, maybe because you are paralyzed. Therefore, you don't move. This is one possibility. The other possibility is you are so silent that you don't move. You don't feel the need to move. You are so quiet. So either you are paralyzed or you are lazy, therefore you don't move. That is one possibility. The other possibility is you are so silent. The experience is the same. You are in a chair. Is it the same? In some degrees, yes. But in some ways, no. And that is why Patanjali presents the second part to this sutra, Alambana Tamo Vrittihi. The support for sleep is tamas, heaviness. The guna called tamas, that makes you immobile. Heaviness makes you immobile. When you are heavy with tamas, you don't move. The senses are so heavy, the mind is so heavy, it cannot move because tamas is dominant. Tamas is dominant. Therefore, you sleep, you don't move. That is defined as nidra. Whereas turiya, or the yoga state, what is also called chaturtaha by Patanjali, the fourth state, that is a state where there is no movement because of sattva, the sattva guna, silence. A silent mind, a still mind does not move. Like a lake that is so quiet, it's not moving. It's so silent, it's reflecting the object that is in front of it like a mirror because it is so quiet. So therefore, the mind also has that capacity where we reach a state of silence and the mind does not move. The body and the senses does not move because the consciousness is withdrawn because of sattva's dominance. That is what is called as alambana sattva vritti state, chaturtaha. It's not nidra. Because sleep is when tamas is dominant. The senses and the mind, they become dominated by tamas. Therefore, it cannot grasp an object for its cognition. Whereas in the yoga state, the sattva is there. It also will not grasp an object for cognition, but it will reflect an object that is in front of it. Do you understand? The experience is different. Both, they do not move, but they serve different functions, because in sleep, because the heaviness is there, it cannot grasp something as an object for cognition, as an object for identification. That's why we have no knowledge in sleep. We don't have knowledge as a consequence of sleep. Abhor Pratyaya. Whereas in the state of yoga, there is knowledge, because Patanjali says, when you master samadhi, prajna lokaha, ritambhara tatra prajna. Many times he says you will have prajna, clarity, you will have knowledge, etc. Because in the yoga state, the mind becomes like a mirror, and therefore it sees what is in front of it. There is some cognition, some awareness that happens, and that is what is the state of yoga. That is also a silencing of the mind, but that is not nidra. In some schools of yoga, they call this state yoga nidra, because it looks like sleep, but it doesn't feel like sleep. It looks like sleep because the mind is not moving, the senses are not moving, so quiet. But it doesn't feel like sleep because there is a cognition that is arising out of it. There is an awareness that is arising out of it, which does not happen when there is sleep. So that is the difference, and that is why Patanjali clarifies it, that this state of sleep is defined by the predominance of the tamas. Abhor Pratyaya alambana tamovrittihi nidra. This is what is sleep. How he defines it. There is an important attribute that we also have to discuss, which is that when Patanjali is saying sleep is not an activity, Abhor Pratyaya, how is he presenting it among the chitta vrittis? The activities of the mind are 5. Sleep is an activity, but sleep is a state of no activity. So sometimes we can think, oh, Patanjali may be confused. We have to answer this in a metaphoric way. We say 0 is a number. What's the value of 0? It has no value. But how can it be a number? It is a number because it gives other numbers a value. It's because of 0 that other numbers have a value. The same way, it's because of sleep that other states of mind have a value. All the other states of mind are in somehow or the other, some way or the other, is defined through the state of non-activity, because when there is an activity, this is no more sleep, there is something happening. So it's like almost like sleep is the reference number 0, from which we define other activities of the mind, including pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, as well as smriti, memory, because there is some value that these things are having, because they are defined from something which has apparently no value. But whether there is no value or not, we don't know, because Patanjali later will say that there is value to sleep, because sleep is something which takes us very close to the state of self, Purusha, even though there is not the awareness. That's why even though we are visiting the Purusha every day when we sleep, We don't really call ourselves self-realized people because we don't have the cognition of the Purusha just because we are sleeping. Are you following this? Whereas when we are in a state of yoga where the sattva is dominant and we recognize the Purusha in that state because of the reflection, then we become a self-realized person. So even though we are visiting the Purusha every day during our sleep, we don't necessarily become self-realized persons because the cognition is not there, the pratyaya is not there. That is why Patanjali uses the word Abhor Pratyaya. Abhor Pratyaya. We are visiting the Purusha sometimes more than once a day. For example, in India, we are used to having a siesta in the afternoon. People nap in the afternoon for a few hours. So we are sleeping one time in the daytime, one time in the night time. So we are frequently visiting Purusha. Our own Purusha, we are going, saying hello, how are you, and coming back. But we have no recognition of that because Abhor Pratyaya, the tamas dominance, does not allow for the mind and the senses to register that experience as a cognitive experience, as an experience of awareness. And that is why we are not necessarily having the clarity just because we are sleeping. So this is the sutra Abhor Pratyaya Alambana Tamo Vrittihi Nidra. This is the sutra 110. The next sutra is defining what is called memory. Anubhuta Vishayaha Asampramoshaha Smritihi. It's also very remarkable because memory is also a very important activity that we have, because memory is what gives us structure for functioning in daily life. We don't have to learn things each day new. So things become a little bit more simpler. Imagine if you have to learn how to walk every day, if you have to learn how to speak every day, if you have to learn how to know the names of the people you are living with every day. This will not be so easy, not only for you but also for others. So in some way memory is an ally. It makes us like a friend. It's a way of learning. But Patanjali is very clear. Anubhuta Vishayaha. Memory only comes when there is an experience with something. That experience has to register in us. For example, we go in flights, we travel in an aeroplane, we go to the check-in counter, we go to the plane seat, then we go through security, we meet certain people. So we are experiencing. But these experiences don't register because it's just very light. You don't really experience it very deeply. Whereas if one of these experiences turns out to be a bit strong, or it's repeated again and again that it's become strong, like for example you check in every day in an aeroplane and you have the same lady or gentleman who is checking you in every day, that starts to get registered in your mind. Or if you are just even one time checking in, but that there is some problem or there is some positive experience that happens that is very deeply touching you, that gets registered as an experience. That's how trauma sometimes registers as a memory, because it happens one time so strong, maybe, or sometimes it happens lightly on a repeated basis and it gets registered. But what is very important to remember is that memory only comes from experience. Memory only comes from experience. Therefore, memory is always from the past. You cannot have memory of something from the future You cannot have something of memory from the present. That's why Patanjali uses the term anubhuta. It's a past tense. You have experienced an object. He doesn't use the word anubhava, which is present tense. You can't have a memory of something that is happening now. You can have something that is happening now as a memory a few minutes later, but not in this moment, not while it is happening. So this is what is anubhuta vishaya, and there has to be some object, something for you to experience. You cannot experience the nothing. There has to be something. It's a person, or it's a thing, or it's an experience, or it's an emotion. There has to be an experience. And when that experience gets registered very deeply, asampramoshaha, you don't lose it. It's permanent. From the point of view of the yoga philosophy, memory is permanent. Of course, what it does not take into consideration is if there is something like brain damage or things like that. Even there, they probably, the way yoga philosophy will look at it is that memory is there, but you are just not accessing that memory. It's always there. That's why sometimes, for example, when you are meeting people, for example, you may be a little bit older in your life, but you meet people from your childhood, maybe 20, 30 years later. Memories come back, but for the last 30, 40 years, you did not have those memories, but the memories come back. That means that memory was always there. The memory was always there. But it's not accessed by you all the time. But it doesn't mean it's gone. That's why he uses the word asampramoshaha. When a memory has been strongly imprinted, it's not lost, it's there. And in some ways, all material learning is dependent on memory. All that the mind has to learn, the senses has to learn, is dependent on memory. For example, you take a sperm and an ovary that has to create a child. How does it know what kind of child it has to create? It has memory, it has information in the form of memory. There's memory implanted in that cell that says, well, you have to create a human child. You cannot create a bird, because the information that is stored as memory is not that of a bird. So you have to have a human child. That child must have maybe this skin color, maybe this eye color, maybe this hair color, because that is what is the memory that is passed from ancestry. So please don't think memory is only from the point of view of brain memory. In the point of view of yoga philosophy, Ayurveda philosophy, memory is also cellular memory. Your hand, your body knows how to function. You are not necessarily conscious of it. Your stomach knows how to digest food. Your heart knows how to pump blood. Your circulation system knows which direction that blood has to go. Nobody is teaching it every day. So there is memory in every cell that takes care of certain functioning. And that is never lost. That is always there. The body knows how to breathe. We don't pay attention to breathing except maybe when we are doing asana or pranayama, when the teacher is reminding us, usually we are paying attention. Otherwise we are forgetting to breathe. When we are going shopping or when we are traveling in a train or something like that, we are not consciously paying attention to the breath all the time. It's happening because the body has learnt. That will never be lost. Imagine if your body has to learn how to breathe. A child, the moment it's born, it knows how to breathe. It's not a skill that it learns. A fish that is immediately born, it knows how to swim. Didn't go to a swimming coaching class, because that memory, that learning is there in the form of memory in the cellular level itself. So that is what is smriti. There is a deep memory that is often coming from experiences. Now here is the question. These experiences is not necessarily always your experiences. It can be experiences that comes from the past. When we say the past, what is the past? And in the Vedic tradition, they say the past includes your past ancestry. And in some points of view, they also say past lives. So people who believe in reincarnation, they believe that some memory is not coming from this life, it's coming from past lives. Now some people have difficulty to accept the view of past lives. Okay, no problem. But we cannot deny that some memories come from past generations. We are created by conscious entities. A mother and a father need to be alive to create us. And therefore they carry some memories, they carry some vast impressions from the past that often is transferred into our life as memory, as impressions. This is very, very important for us to understand. That's why in the Vedic culture we always say we have to pay a lot of attention to the ancestry, because many of our behavior, many of our patterns come from past, not only our past but also past ancestry. In this regard, I have to say that memory and patterns are very often very closely related. Patanjali in the 4th chapter says this: Jati desha kala vyavahitanamapi anantaryam smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. Memory and samskaras, they have one form, they are not separate, they are together. Like when you have one particular memory, the associated patterns come back. When you have another memory that is dominant, other associated patterns come back. Few weeks ago, for example, my wife and I went to a cinema, and in the cinema, at the end of the cinema, I came out, I heard a voice say, Kausthub. They called my name out, somebody called the name out, and immediately turned to look around, and I saw that it was one of my childhood friends from my university days, about 18-20 years ago. We went to the same university. So, and I'm seeing him after 20 years or so, and so we were talking for a few minutes. And we exchanged, and then when we left, my wife asked the question, who was that? And I said, oh, it's my friend from university. No, I don't mean that fellow. Who was that? Who are you? Because my samskara of talking, my communication style, everything changed, because it went back to how I would have probably been when I was a university student. And this guy is also, my last memory of this guy is with university time. And so all the associated patterns of communication, patterns of body language, other things come back. That's why Patanjali says, Smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. Memory and patterns are very close allies. Sometimes memory is creating the pattern, sometimes patterns are creating the memory. Sometimes patterns are creating the memory, sometimes memories are creating the pattern, and they are stuck together. So when one thing comes forward, the other thing also comes very closely, immediately it comes back. And you may be in such a different mood, you may be in such a different environment, but when a trigger for one memory comes back, immediately all the associated samskara and memory comes back. For example, you may be in a very nice restaurant with your husband or wife and partner and having a very nice meal. Maybe it's your wedding anniversary or something like that. It's a very special occasion. You're in a very happy mood. Everything has been going on very well. And the same time in the restaurant, at some point of time, somebody walks in and you recognize that this person may be somebody from your past who caused some trauma for you. Maybe it was a school teacher, or maybe it was a neighbor, or maybe it was somebody else from your neighborhood, etc. And they caused some trauma for you. Immediately, within a second, the pattern changes, your breathing changes, your voice changes, your body starts sweating, panicking, it starts to freeze. Immediately the other patterns, other samskaras disappear because this comes back. That is why Patanjali says, Smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. And not only does he say that, he says there may be separation in terms of place, there may be separation in terms of time, there may be separation in terms of even the kind of activities you are doing, etc. But the old memories are never lost. Jati desha kala vyavahitanam api anantaryam. Maybe 20, 30 years ago that this person caused you some trauma. But it doesn't matter. It's not disappeared. That is the negative side of the memory being permanent. When memory is permanent, it can be positive, because when we can connect with positive memories, it is helpful. But memories can also be negative and hurtful when the memory is which is associated, is always associated with negative things. And this is very, very important for us to realize. That is why smriti is also klishta or aklishta. It can hurt or it can be helpful. This is very important for us to remember. There's another thing that I would like to say before we conclude this sutra, which is very important to understand also, is in some context, the word memory, smriti, is very often associated with the word dhyanam, meditation. Smaranam, dhyanam are somehow synonyms. Because what is happening in dhyanam? In dhyanam, you are holding the object of focus without distraction. You are holding it, you are sustaining the connection to that object of focus. What is happening in memory? You are holding memory or an object that you want to remember for continuously for a long time. So in some ways they are associated. That's why some contexts, instead of using the word dhyanam, they use the word smaranam, smriti. For example, Shankaracharya wrote a very beautiful poem about remembering Lord Krishna in a baby form. And he always ends this, he's having 8 different verses. Every verse he ends with the same line. Balam mukundam manasa smarami. Smarami comes from the word memory. I remember. Basically in that context it means I meditate. Here again we have to all reflect about this, because if memory and meditation are similar, and we learn from the school of meditation that when we meditate on something, we receive the qualities of what we are meditating upon. We receive, when we meditate on the sun, we receive the sun's qualities. When we meditate on the moon, we receive the moon's qualities. Similarly, whatever we choose to meditate, that qualities we are receiving. Now it's the same with memory. Whatever we hold as memory, that is what we become. What we become is essentially what we hold as memory. So if we hold only negative experiences as memory, because memory comes from negative experiences, we become negative. The experience is gone. But that is what we are holding. We become stubborn with it. Even if the experience wants to go, we don't let it go. We hold it and remind it and give it power, and we hold it as memory. That is what we will become. Whereas if we focus on positive memories, that is what we will become. We will become positive. In all of our life, We have different objects, different people, different circumstances. We don't only have negative experiences with these people. Even with the same people, we don't have only negative experiences. We also have negatives, we also have positives. But when we understand this sutra in this way, what we hold as memory, that is what we will become. So the choice is with us. That is what determines whether it's klishta or aklishta. When we hold on to negative memories all the time, we become negative. Whereas when we choose to hold on to some things that are positive, some memories that are positive, that is what we will become. And please remember, that choice of which kind of memory we are going to hold on is not with the object, it is with each of us. So we have to make that choice.